The British government claims to support and respect human rights abroad. However, its record in Latin America suggests the polar opposite. Jeremy Hunt was delighted to collaborate with US efforts to destabilise the Venezuelan government. The key strand of this was freezing almost $2 billion worth of gold held in the Bank of England. In terms of Venezuela, Britain has a key interest in supporting whatever Washington wants to do. It's scandalous that the British public is not informed at all by the mainstream media about British foreign policy in Latin America. After the death of Hugo Chavez in 2013 and the commodities crash in 2015, the US government saw a key opportunity to topple the Venezuelan government once again. Since 2019, it has re-upped these efforts in its recognition of Juan Guaidó.
Here this evening is a very brave man who carries with him the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of all Venezuelans. Joining us in the gallery is the true and legitimate president of Venezuela, Juan Guaidó. Mr. President, please take this message back to your family.
In February 2019, the UK government made the unprecedented decision to recognise Juan Guaidó as President of Venezuela. At this time, Juan Guaidó had never ran for presidential office, and according to one poll, only 1 in 5 Venezuelans had even heard of him. Since then, the UK government has been Washington's key ally in destabilisation and coup efforts against the Venezuelan government of Nicolas Maduro.
We are extremely concerned about the situation in Venezuela. So the United Kingdom believes that Juan Guaidó is the right person to take Venezuela forward. We are supporting the efforts of the United States.
Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, and Britain has long-standing interests in Venezuela's oil. As Alan Duncan wrote, a former Foreign Office official, Britain's interest in the reconstruction of Venezuela's oil industry includes British Petroleum, Shell and other British multinationals that want to get their hands on Venezuela's massive oil reserves. However, Britain also has geostrategic interests in toppling the Venezuelan government. Following Brexit, British foreign policy will become more aligned with that of the US. In terms of Venezuela, Britain has a key interest in supporting whatever Washington wants to do. In January 2019, Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt travelled to Washington to meet US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, National Security Advisor to the Trump administration John Bolton, and a number of others. According to John Bolton's book, Jeremy Hunt was delighted to collaborate with US efforts to destabilise the Venezuelan government. The key strand of this was freezing almost $2 billion worth of gold held in the Bank of England. Now, this case goes back as far as 2018, when the Maduro government requested access to this gold. After declaring himself president, Juan Guaidó created an ad hoc board to represent the Central Bank of Venezuela. So following the Maduro board's success in the Court of Appeal in 2020, the Guaidó board was obliged to pay £400,000 to the Maduro board. However, in recently opened court documents, it has become clear that the money paid to the Maduro board has actually came out of Central Bank of Venezuela funds that have been requisitioned in the US by the US government. To provide an analogy, it's a little bit like robbing someone's house and then using the money stolen from that house to rob the house again. This could set a momentous legal precedent. Within the UK government's foreign policy arsenal, it could then use derecognition as a means to strip a certain state of its national assets. And it will also serve to blur the line between the judiciary and the executive even more. So in May 2020, I revealed the existence of a secretive Venezuela reconstruction unit held in the British Foreign Office. Prior to this article, no reference had ever been made to the Venezuela reconstruction unit. Its head, for example, John Saville, the former ambassador to Venezuela between 2014 and 2017, held no official role on any governmental website. The Venezuelan government, for its part, claimed that it had never heard of the Venezuela reconstruction unit and that it had no idea that the British Foreign Office was secretly planning for the total reconstruction of its economy. So in response to this revelation, the Venezuelan foreign minister summoned the UK Chargé d'Affaires to answer for British actions. The British government, for its part, claimed that this was only a small unit that had been set up to ensure the prosperity of Venezuela in a hypothetical future scenario when Maduro was no longer the government. So despite this event creating something of a diplomatic crisis between Venezuela and Britain, it received very little exposure in the mainstream British press. Indeed, the British press is generally totally disinterested in British foreign policy, especially when it leads to something embarrassing for the British state. If we think hypothetically about Russia, for example, creating a British reconstruction unit for a hypothetical post-coup Britain, this would obviously make mainstream news and be headline news. However, this did not make headline news because the mainstream media in the UK typically aligns with the foreign policy objectives of the British state. And it's not just the mainstream right-wing press in the UK that has joined the onslaught against the Venezuelan government. Among the worst culprits of misinformation and disinformation on Venezuela are the BBC and The Guardian. Following the coup against Chavez in 2002, for example, the BBC described the situation as the dawn of a new democratic time in Venezuela, and they even compared Hugo Chavez to Adolf Hitler. Academic studies of the BBC's reporting on Venezuela during the presidency of Hugo Chavez showed that roughly 99% of all news stories portrayed Venezuela in a negative light. The Guardian, for instance, has been fairly sympathetic to Juan Guaidó's coup efforts in Venezuela, and this isn't an isolated event. As Alan MacLeod showed in his chapter in the book Capitalism's Conscience, The Guardian has been, for the past 20 or so years, consistently sympathetic to right-wing movements that oppose popular mobilisations in Latin America. It's startling to look at the difference between UK foreign policy to Venezuela and Colombia. Over past months, in response to a general strike and popular mobilisations in Colombia, the Colombian police, which is trained both by the British military and the British police, has killed roughly 50 people, disappeared countless more, has been accused of sexual violence against protesters and various other crimes. The British government remains a staunch ally of the Colombian government. The British government claims to support and respect human rights abroad. However, its record in Latin America suggests the polar opposite. In 2019, following a coup against Evo Morales in Bolivia, the British government rushed to recognise the coup government of Jeanine Áñez. According to documents revealed by Declassified UK, Britain's support for the coup in Bolivia was based around gaining access to what it called white gold, Bolivia's lithium reserves. If we go back even further to 1973 with the coup against Salvador Allende in Chile, the British government was keenly interested in stopping a popular socialist government. In order to subvert Allende, the British government, through a secretive Foreign Office unit named the Information Research Department, collected and distributed strategically valuable information designed to damage Allende and to support his opponent, Christian Democrat Eduardo Frei. Following the coup against Allende in 1973 and the installment of the brutal regime under Augusto Pinochet, the Heath government rushed to recognise his government, while the Pinochet regime rounded up political opponents and was involved in torture and murder. The UK government has never been sympathetic to a socialist or popular movement in Latin America. In fact, every time it has had the opportunity to arrest such movements, it has taken it. It's scandalous that the British public is not informed at all by the mainstream media about British foreign policy in Latin America. As most viewers know, the corporate media in Britain was responsible for a vicious disinformation campaign against Jeremy Corbyn from 2016 to present. If that happened right under our noses here in Britain, think about the levels of disinformation being propagated about Venezuela in the mainstream press as the British state tries to overthrow their government. Given the almost total media blackout on British foreign policy in Latin America, it's now more important than ever to support independent media like the Canary that are doing reporting on these crucial matters.